Welcome to webinar number 6. It's a series of webinars emphasizing the voice of Africa in preparation for COP27. The previous topics were climate finance, small farmers, early warning system for natural disasters, adaptation readiness, carbon market. And here we are with the African youth who we are relying and hoping would make all the difference. I would like to welcome with us Her Excellency Dr. Yasmine Fouad, our Minister of the Environment, who is actually very keen on being part of our webinars and listening to your opinion. And even if she misses part of it, we send the recording because it's extremely important. Dr. Yasmine, if I may, even before your intervention, if I may, because one of our speakers is actually traveling and is standing in the airport, okay, just for this intervention. When we talked yesterday, I was saying you are the only gentleman in the group of speakers, so you are going to come last. And then he told me, but I'm the one that's traveling, so I'm going to go first. Okay, so he imposed on us the fact that he's going first because he's traveling. Okay, so I'm going to start with you, Cedric. But before I do, in a second, the whole idea about talking with African youth is because we all believe that young people have a different way of looking at things, have a different way of thinking, have a different way of perceiving the problem of the climate and its impact on their life and what needs to be done. It's around those issues that this entire exercise or webinar is actually rotating. So Cedric, I'm going to give you the floor for 10-12 minutes because I know your traveling condition, let's put it this way, okay, to give us your take on how young people perceive the climate problem, whether we're talking about Ghana, your home country, or more than that, and what needs to be done in order to improve the situation. So go ahead, Cedric.
And sorry for the noise. I am in a plane. I will take off in the next 20 minutes. So sorry for the noise. So I'm speaking from someone with the perspective of being part of global discussions, global forums, such as COP26 and the African Union deliberations on climate change, and someone who is also able to have the opportunity to implement this project, climate change adaptation project on the grassroots in my community. What I can say about climate change among young people in Ghana is that there is a growing knowledge on climate change. Young people, unlike 10 years ago, 20 years ago, are getting to know.
Cedric, just one second. I want to welcome Her Excellency Dr. Yasmine. And because of their understanding, I'm going to return the floor to Cedric because he's traveling, he's on a plane, so he's going to take his 10 minutes, okay? So please stay with us. Okay, go ahead, Cedric, continue. Go ahead.
Okay, yes, and young people are getting to know about climate change because they see the consequences all around them. However, the question that young people are posing is the challenge of how are they able to navigate these crises? Because whenever I go down and talk about climate change, young people are not really concerned about the theories and the consequences of climate change per se, but they are concerned more about the immediate needs. Young people are talking about jobs. Young people are talking about education, opportunities, skill building. However, when through my education, I am able to talk to them about how climate change affects their jobs, affects their education, their well-being, their health. It now dawns on them to realize that their lives are truly affected by the consequences of climate change. Then they now get on board to discuss the issue. And therefore brings us to the topic of their major concern. How are they able to transition? How are they able to participate in the scheme of affairs of ensuring that opportunities will not be lost upon them as far as they are involved? They are talking about how they get the skills to engage in climate change adaptation, climate change resilience, mitigation, so that they will be able to, as it would be, cascade their personal ambitions, their societal concerns into the climate change agenda. One of the critical areas of transition is education. The young people are saying that they have educated themselves in different fields for the past 10 years. However, climate change consequences are going to make part of the education a little bit non-relevant. For instance, young people are into petroleum and energy, but we are told that the world is now moving to clean energy. We're going to use solar. We're going to use electricity cars. How will young people who have studied petroleum, oil and gas, how would they be able to transition to these areas? These are all major concerns. But these same young people are proposing some of solutions. They are asking to be educated. They are asking that, given the fact that they're in the local communities, that they have local knowledge and expertise to respond to the climate crisis, is it possible that organizations such as the Egyptian Center for Economic Studies will be able to provide opportunities for these young people to inculcate local knowledge, local adaptation strategies to the climate change solution, so that they will not be pushed aside, so that they will be involved in the implementation strategies of addressing the concerns. So I should say in summary that young people have a growing knowledge of the topic, and they are scared of the future, being scared because of their lack of capacity to engage. And they're calling on organizations such as the Egyptian Center for Economic Studies to ensure that their expertise and skills will be upgraded to meet the changing times and change solutions, and to also be able to leverage on local expertise in management. I'd like to take that before the plane takes off.
Thank you so much, Cedric. Thank you so much, Cedric. You made your point. I want to move on to Her Excellency Dr. Yasmine Fouad. Okay, so even before you started, you heard the complaints. What about jobs? Our education is expired. We've been learning all those things, and now suddenly you are telling us we're going to shift to something else. So we need to hear from you, and I have to tell everybody again that Dr. Yasmine has been with us in all the webinars, really encouraging the initiative of hearing the voice of Africa, and she's waiting for what we're going to deliver in written format to actually help in taking positions actually in COP27 itself. So I welcome you, Your Excellency. Please intervene. Your intervention, please.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Abla. I would like at the outset to express the thanks and appreciation for the set of webinar that the ECES is conducting together with the CIB for the sake of hearing not only the voices, but also the views, the experiences of Africa in different sectors along climate change. I think this is the 6th webinar, if I'm not mistaken,
yes.
On the African youth. I had the pleasure really to participate in most of them. I failed and I missed 1 or 2, but I had the pleasure to participate in most of them. First of all, I think that we have 2 folds to the topic today on the African youth. The one related to the, as Dr. Abla was mentioning, on the putting the foundation, building the curriculums of the climate change, how that could be done within uplifting the education system that is fully integrated climate at the heart of that. And Egypt has an experience with that part. And another part is the voices of Africa and how best can they be positioned within the upcoming COP27 in view. For the first one at the national level, it started 3 years ago, even before Egypt thought of hosting the COP. While we were doing the reform educational system for the young school children, we thought that it is very important to integrate the global environment, especially climate and biodiversity, in that curriculum. And that was a result of collaboration between Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Education. At that time, it was Dr. Tariq Shawki, while he was working on reforming the education system and building that on a digital platform. We had prepared a curriculum on climate change. That curriculum would give more definitions on climate for the young children, and it will increase as long as they are growing older. But it has a package of interactive activities that would be accompanied with the curriculum and how climate would be integrated. And here we are integrating climate in the part related to the science, in the geography, in the history, in the math, in most of the things that they would be taking over. But more and above, there was a package of training to the teachers. So we are training the teacher for them to understand how they can explain the climate context within the stereotype subject that they are doing. So for example, when we target the science teacher or the geography teacher, we would give them more specific training on how can they explain climate within the context of their subject. And we were able throughout the last year to train around 1,500 train of the trainers from all over the governorates in Egypt. And here I'm talking about the national governmental schools. We're not talking about the international schools in Egypt. We're talking about the regular part of that. And in order to assess how our message was best communicated, we had a competition that was announced all over the 27 governorates in Egypt on drawings related to climate change and some arts that would be conducted from the school children up to the secondary school. And we're announcing that as part of the events that will take place in the COP. That relates on how climate and education can be interlinked, and national country can do that. For the COP itself, we feel that it's very important on three things. First of all, there is a day that is dedicated for the youth as part of the presidency program and the thematic days. Number two, between the 2nd and the 4th of November, and before the beginning of the COP, a workshop that will take place in Egypt that relates to the Yungu. The Yungu is the official mainstream of the youth within the UNFCCC process, so that we can hear their voices and understand what would they like to see within the conference itself and the negotiation process. And last but not least, the green zone. We have a part that is related to the women and to the youth, and there are boosts to entrepreneurs that will be there. But much more important is that within the green zone, which is different than the blue zone, that is the stereotype agenda of the UNFCCC, there is a day that we're dedicated for Africa. And that day, it's called an Africa Day in the green zone, where we are getting small young entrepreneurs from Africa that's COP for implementation. So they are presenting their solution up to the floor to the whole world. I hope that would give a good intro and food for thought for the webinar today. Over to you, Dr. Abla.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Yasmine. This is definitely very useful, and it says a bit of what we are going to expect in COP27 for the youth. And I think we're going to hear from them now a lot more that we can add actually to this, okay, about initiatives and ideas on how to improve the situation. Let me do to what I was supposed to do at the beginning, but I was rushed by the plane that was taking off for Cedric. Let me introduce the participants. We have Hanae Bezad from Morocco. Hanae is a serial entrepreneur, technologist, consultant in innovation, and board advisor. She has launched EdTech ventures and initiatives to empower vulnerable youth with technical skills while promoting gender equity. She also developed strong ties with the African startup ecosystems and worked as a policy advisor for African governments. She's currently the CEO of the Bihan LLC since 2021. Hanae has held senior positions at Smart Africa, founded Duar Tech, and set up the first Leeuwarden coding school, among many others. I don't know when did you have the time to do all this, but
Thank you so much, Dr. Avila. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you.
you were born, I suppose. We have Pato Kelesitse from Botswana. I hope I'm pronouncing the last name right. Am I? Yes?
Almost. Kelesitse. Literally the way it's written is the way it's said.
It's Pato, all right? So Pato is a sustainable development practitioner who advocates for climate justice with a gendered lens as a critical development pillar. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Accounting and Finance and is a Master's of Arts in Development Studies candidate at the University of Botswana, founder of Sustain 267 and the host of Sustain 267 podcast. She has previously served as the coordinator of Resilient 40. Currently, she's a project officer at the South African Climate Action Network and curator of Global Shapers Community Gaborone Hub. She serves as an advisor for Urgent Action Fund Africa. My ladies have been very busy. Right? I have Sojoud Elgarrai from Sudan. Sojoud is a visual communications and media studies professional. She's a communications and advocacy specialist, senior media consultant. She's a documentary photographer and filmmaker, a strategic visual communication specialist who has served as an administrative director with African women filmmakers in Sudan and other African countries, as well as a senior media consultant serving youth, children, and other volunteer organizations. It's great to have you, Sojoud.
Hello, hi everybody.
Cedric, who just left today, maybe I'll introduce him, or what do you think? Should I, just pass him because he's not here? I'll be a good girl and introduce him. He's a global climate change ambassador of the World YMCA. Cedric is a global climate change ambassador of the World YMCA, the oldest and largest NGO in the world into the business of empowering the youth by providing young people with space and giving them the voice to enable them to transform their communities. Cedric is currently the Director of Administration and Finance for the African Youth Commission, which is a network of young people focused on working to achieve the Africa We Want Agenda 2063. He's the focal person for Africa on a 5-year climate change advocacy project funded by the Netherlands government. It's great to have you, actually, all of you, and the bios were very impressive. And when I had the short talk with you guys before the meetings, I was even more impressed. Okay, now let's get to business. Let me start by asking the three of you, as a matter of fact, about the level of awareness of young people for the climate change and how they perceive it. Cedric already answered his part there, and he said, well, they see it and they don't see it, okay, at the same time. They see it, but they are focused on their future, their jobs, what's happening to them. Are they really aware? So let me start with Hanae. What do you think, the level of awareness of the young people?
Thank you for your question. I would say young people in Morocco and the North African region, and this is also a reality in the rest of the continent as I perceived it, have a strong awareness of the challenges. And they have not only awareness, they see urgency, they know stories of people in their communities that have been affected by climate change heavily in their businesses, in their private lives. Today in Morocco, for instance, if you take the case of Morocco, it's the worst drought in 30 years. A lot of people have shortages in water, in electricity, in rural areas, and this concerns areas that are more marginalized than richer areas where a lot of policymakers live, and it's their reality. So there's a strong awareness. There's also a strong frustration of not being part of the conversation on creating policies that make sense. But at the same time, you would find them very eager to contribute. So a lot of people with their small means at their small community levels are creating initiatives that try to take from the best benchmarks around the world, but that are also very contextualized. So they're developing expertise. They're also relying on expertise, and they do things. Now, they also are aware of the need for support. And I feel like some people are also understanding that whatever they're doing at their small scale is also something happening at the regional level, at the Pan-African level, and they could so benefit from coming together with the rest of the activists, artivists, and taking part and being solicited and contributing in a collective intelligence approach to solutions that are pragmatic, that are real and are creating better realities.
We'll come back to that on the specific initiatives and what can be done and how those little things can be scaled up and how to be part of the conversation for real, okay? Because this is actually what we are after. This is what we want to tell them in COP27. We are here, you guys are here, you are here, okay, and can do something and need to do something about it. All right, now, same question for Sojoud. The level of awareness, again, and you can talk about youth in general, in your opinion, plus the specific case of Sudan, and if Sudan is a bit of a special case. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. For us in Sudan, people are very aware because we have this last flood season. We had one of the worst floods since 1985. And we have an ongoing war in Darfur that is basically, it's a racially motivated war, but it's basically over resources and desertification. So that news it's rampant. It's everybody speaks about it. We also have lots of issues of mining and poisoning of heavy metals due to like individuals mining, not following mining rules for gold, and gold is being mined everywhere, and that's affecting groundwaters. And there is a very high level of this desertification. So even if you are 20 years old, 5 years ago when you were 15, you remember that the weather was different. So this year it was very visibly, we have humidity, something that we are not used to at all in Sudan. The Ethiopian dam is creating heavier rains, and we are very aware that this is changing the climate in our the Great Dam, and it's creating internally displaced people because of the desertification. People are moving away from their farmlands that they no longer can farm. So, and it's putting heavier pressure on cities. A lot of people are moving to Khartoum. Khartoum is now more than a third of the population of the country. There is a lot of immigration, young Sudanese people leaving Sudan, going about it in a very dangerous way, going through Libya, trying to cross the Mediterranean to Europe. And that's creating a lot of heartache and just a lot of young people losing their lives. So it's something that people speak about all the time, that the summers are much hotter now, the winters are much colder, the weather is very harsh, and that we have humidity. We're a dry savanna country. So the fact that we have humidity is very clear. You see it, girls complain about their hair is changing. Like it's a very basic level. So everybody is aware of climate change.
Very important observation. Very important observation. This last one.
No. They talk about this like this climate change is killing us. This climate change is ruining our hair. It's a thing. So people speak about it at the very micro level and at a very big level. But the issue is it's an overwhelming topic for Sudanese youth. They think it's very government oriented, that it should be solved by the government. The transitional government we had before the military coup changed the laws to where importing solar panels was tariff-free. And that helped a lot in the electricity shortages. And the University of Khartoum and the technical universities are offering training for electric engineers, free training to be able to install solar panels. And so they're going about it that way. We're talking about windmills, anything to combat the issues of just like population shifts and cities needing more electricity and not being able to provide it. And that's affecting everybody's lives, of course. So, but at a tangible level, that there is small initiatives here and there, but everybody seems to think the question is so big and it's a government lack of willingness issue, as opposed to them being able to change it at a personal level. So that's where we are.
Yeah, so the question is big and they're overwhelmed with it and with everything else that's happening in Sudan. Okay. And
yes, definitely. The transition, we're now in a coup. There is protests once a week practically, and every week more than like 5 people die in protests. So it's a very tense situation, and it's been going on for almost a year. October 25th will be a year for the coup, and people keep going in the streets, and the military says they're going to back down. It's going to be civilian rule, but they want to choose a civilian. So it's a very tense situation. So people think, while they understand the environment is important, they think just stabilizing government is a priority.
Okay, thank you very much, Sojoud. Thank you for this. Okay, now, Pato, Botswana. How different are the youth in Botswana? Do they understand the situation? What is the level of awareness?
Firstly, as the other two speakers were speaking, I was just like snapping, because I think there's a common thread between our different countries, although different regions. And just Sojoud, my heart goes out to you and your country, and we'll continue to pray for you for stability. But in terms of the awareness of African youth in my area, again, I should qualify what I'm saying by saying that, a lot of people who I will interact with as youth are from certain levels of privilege, certain levels of education. So even I'll try to extend it beyond them, but just saying that, so I qualify that I don't speak for all of them, but there's a high level of awareness. If today it's hot, today it's like 36 degrees, I think. If you look on the Twitter timeline, it's just people talking about the heat. We're aware of climate change. We may not be talking about the 2% and the trajectory of the heat in relation to the emissions and all that technical language, but we're very aware of the changing climate. When we greet each other, it's, hey, how are you? How are you? Oh my goodness, this heat. Immediately, we're having the climate conversation, even though it's not as formal. And how we're feeling anxious. Like Hanae said earlier, we're feeling anxious, but because we're being so excluded from the conversation, it's difficult, because you want to do something. We're trying to do so much with the little that we have, and we're doing something, but it's difficult because we're at the margins of the conversation. We're at the margins of power on a continent where the average age is 19, but the average political leader is over 60. So whatever we do is so limited to the margins. And even when you're invited in, I mean, just talking about the Botswana COP27 delegation last year, they had 1 youth on the delegation. Yet, if we're looking at the commitments that are being made for the next 30 years, for the next 50 years, that 1 youth is probably the only one who will have to live out these decisions that are being made now. So it's just, we're aware and somehow trying to still keep acting in a place where we feel like no one is listening to us, where we feel marginalized, where the time when you're given a space to look into solutions and execute some of your solutions, you're told African solutions for African problems must be led by African youth. And then the funder will tell you, however, you can do anything you want within the restriction of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but you can do anything you want. And so that's where we are. We know what's happening. We want to do something. We lack the resources sometimes, but just us talking together, conversations like this, knowing that, well, while we're pushing in Southern Africa, someone's pushing in East Africa, someone's pushing in North Africa, and when we keep going, we will get some sort of hopefully positive result. So yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Pato. Now I think we've set the stage very nicely, okay? You guys are frustrated because you're not part of the conversation, you're not part of the decision-making, even though you are the ones that are subject to it, and you've put it very nicely, all right? There's only one candidate that's going to survive this whole thing, and they are deciding together something that he is going, or she is going to live it, and they will probably not be there to see the effect, and yet no one is hearing you. Okay, so we're hearing you, and the next part of our talk, and this is where we want to focus, all the time and all the attention, is how to make you part of the conversation, how to make your contributions visible. You mentioned something about funding. Funding is definitely always important, but funding is not the only thing, because if there is no idea, if there is no project, if there is no something that has head from tails and with measurable impact, something that can be scalable, then even if the funds are there, they are not going to be useful, all right? So I want very much the talk from here on to focus on the ideas, the innovative mechanisms for making you part of the conversation, part of the solution, not only in rhetoric, in talking about its importance, but actually on the ground solutions for improving the situation. This situation being situation in your countries on the ground, better adaptation, situations at the global level where the big decisions are made. Where would you go different if you are not the only one in the delegation that's going, okay, but rather the whole group? If the whole group of delegation from your country is in the COP27, what would you say and ask for? So bear in mind that this is the background against which we're talking. Okay, back to you, Hannah. Give me solutions, give me mechanisms for implementation, and focus a lot of attention there, please.
I do believe in participatory approaches, very simply put. I do think that any plan, any development plan that structures the action of the government, but also channels the resources of the private sector, because the private sector is absolutely key, it needs to be done in a way where the young people, the activists, those people that have projects already, and their communities are put to the table and say, these are the most pressing needs. And most of the time is, yes, food security, access to clean water, waste management, because they see it constantly, like there's plastic waste all the time. They live it in their communities, the smells, all of it that is toxic. It's a reality. The protection of natural resources. People in their 20s, 30s, in Morocco at least, have seen how degrading the landscapes are, in the forests, the beaches, and it's a pity unless they're in the private realm and people make money out of it, which is also a heartache. And then, of course, the need for resilient, affordable, sustainable housing, because as a matter of fact, we are still a growing population. So from the very beginning, implementing participatory approaches to plans that structure money and that structure projects that are midterm, long-term is key. And also monitoring and evaluation that includes the youth. People need to be held accountable when they have these budgets, but they need to be held accountable towards the rest of society. So otherwise the distrust is continuously fed. And I think it's about rekindling the trust between generations and really saying, we're going to live out with those solutions, or we're going to have to clean up the decisions that were made, and we need support. And of course, the support of the ecosystem, innovative ecosystems. Like, I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs are doing incredible work without having had any support in 5 years, and also having pressures from their families, and especially women. And I've seen here, they're like close to like borderline mental health outbursts, because it's too much pressure to be held. They're shouldering too much. Banks are not playing the game. Plans to feed the ecosystem are not channeling the resources towards the marginalized communities or people that are doing much more work than in respect of these projects. So funding is still key, and accountability and transparency. And we have the tools. Say Innovation for Policy Foundation, for instance, a lot of entrepreneurs came together, put participatory resources to set up startup acts. We can derive from this a lot of ways to create regional plans, Pan-African plans, to work together towards solutions that would be structuring for the funding for implementation and so on.
Okay. Can we do we have something that's even more specific about this getting together, being more part of of the conservation.
It's not just about getting together, and it's not just about conferences that can be great with lots of acclamations, with a lot of like statements. It's the structure of the implementation and making sure that those people that are brought to these places are also held accountable over time. And we have the resources in terms of tracking the objectives, making sure that the logical framework of each or that plan still makes sense in the long term, and doing so with web-based resources where everyone has a say. Again, participatory approaches mean you are putting online the budgets very transparently, and putting the trackers very transparently. Anyone can have access to it as long as they have internet, and anyone can criticize, anyone can give feedback, and there are teams that can transform this feedback into actionable plans as well. So yes, it's simple, but it's not yet there.
Okay, all right. So your suggestion is actually very clear. It's to adopt a different approach towards dealing with the problems of adaptation, resilience, and mitigation, instead of making statements or coming up with a decision and then it's forgotten and no one knows where the budget is, how it was spent, who's responsible. Okay, to have a participatory approach that has transparency and where people are held accountable and follow through. And of course, the more young people are there to manage such process, I think the better. Okay, I'll come back to you again, but now we move to Sojoud. How do you think we can increase the participation and improve the situation? What are the suggestions of young people?
I think for us here, I agree with her that definitely young people need to be a part of the monitoring and evaluation of things, to feel a sense of ownership over government plans. That sense of ownership will really motivate young people. And for us, Africa in general is a very young continent. So involving this as a part of the curriculum will go a long way. Here for us, we had an education minister who put it in the curriculum that children have to take environmental classes and they have to just have competition over tree planting, over school beautifications based on trees, over neighborhood planting for trees. And that was just to bring carbon emissions down. But also we have initiatives here that are like born of this environment. There are co-ops for young women who involve teaching and training women on how to make baskets out of palm trees. That's a renewable resource here. We have more than 100 different kinds of palms, and we have a serious issue with plastic bags. And so that it did great in the states where the government created laws to stop using plastic bags. People went back to buying these palm tree little like basket things, and it saved animals because those are like states where lots of herds and cattle who ended up getting hurt by eating the plastic bags. And it generated income for these women. Then they started creating village saving loan initiatives that generated more funds. And it was a very sustainable approach. And it was a project done by a co-op of young girls who knew the skill was done for centuries in Sudan, but it was never capitalized on. You would just cut your own palm trees and make those things, beauty things, products, things to cover food with, things to carry things in, jewelry boxes for yourself. Your grandma would make them for you. You sit with her when you're young, you know how to make them, but it was never monetized. And so when the government forced people to stop buying plastic bags, and if they had the choice between using paper bags or going back to using these traditional baskets, that before our production of oil, we didn't have that. We were never importing plastic bags. But now that we started producing oil, we just opted out for cheap plastics. Now there is huge efforts into recycling like plastic bottles for like Cokes and Pepsis and those individual bottle things. They're everywhere. So now they're going back into recycling those. There is an initiative that came from Kenya. They're creating bricks out of the plastic, and they're proving to be very well in building things in the rainy places. that the plastic bricks are very strong. People at first were very skeptical, but there is those kinds of solutions, small solutions that are done by young people that start small, but then they build up as they prove themselves, and they are income generating, so they're self-sustaining. But all they need is government support or a government decision that allows this kind of small project to flourish.
Okay, all right. Well, so that's a suggestion for specific projects that are done at the village level, okay, which can be expanded. And I'm sure there are other examples. I know that Hanae has also a bunch of others. But let me move on for now to Pato, and you tell me, how do you think?
So in terms of involving youth, firstly, ditto to the first two speakers, but I think earlier you touched on how do we bring them into the conversation. I think we need to mainstream youth voices. So we're not only hearing youth on youth panels where, quite frankly, no one there has the power to make any sort of decision, versus putting them in the kind of spaces where let's say your ministers or your CEOs who have got financial power, or people where people listen in those spaces for decision making. Not usually we're like an ad break before the adults have the conversation. We're like the entertainment hurrah before the adults have the real conversation. So making sure that those platforms are extended to African youth as well. When we're talking about this is what we're committing to as a continent, let's also make sure that there's a representative of the youth or just a youthful person on there, and also what they say or some of the decisions that we all come across in our different countries and at the COPs are taken forward. So nothing will inspire African youth to continue acting more than seeing that we called for something and we saw it become a reality. Then we know that when we keep working, what we're calling for does become a reality. And then on the point you made about it's not always about the finances, definitely it's not always about the finances. Sometimes we just need an enabling environment. We need people to move out of the way so we can work. Right now, in certain countries, you try to do something and then there's a policy. You try to do something, no, a policy about this. Just sometimes we just need people to move out the way. We don't want money, we don't want the policy, we don't want the guidance, we just need the road to be able to move, because that ends up putting hindrances where we just want to work. And on speaking of work, we as African youth, we don't want governments to work for us. We don't want the older people who are in power to work for us. We don't want institutions to work for us. We want to work with them. When you make a decision, tell us that we're doing XYZ, can you come on and we work to see how we can make this a reality? And the beauty of those intergenerational partnerships is that you've got older people who are coming in with institutional memory and have a bit of the background. But the beauty of institutional memory is also the problem of institutional memory. You know a lot of things which makes you sit in your ways, thus you won't open your mind up to certain things. Whereas if Sojoud comes in there, she doesn't know what fails the first time. She doesn't even know she doesn't have those boxes around her ideas. She just comes in and like pulls something out of thin air and everyone is like, how did you even think of that? Because she doesn't have those restrictions. So that way that's like a win on all sides. We're working together for the continent to win, and also seeing those beautiful ideas come to life with the guidance of people who do have experience at seeing how the house was put on fire last time, and the new ideas with how do we make sure that this comes together well. And then in participation and value of our knowledge, I think when we're in certain spaces, to show the value of young people's knowledge, how it's treated, let's promote young people's knowledge and experience and ideas and entrepreneurial ways from being entertainment to being climate solutions. Once we stop looking at them as entertainment and look at climate solutions, then we can move forward. And then the last 2 points that I wanted to make were on accountability and scale. Hanae touched on this. For as long as we're meeting every year at COP and traveling and taking beautiful pictures and meeting beautiful people, and it's a whole amazing thing, and we're making all these beautiful commitments on beautiful papers, and then we design them and they look so nice, but none of them become a reality, there's no point. We need accountability where what we commit to is coming to life. And as youth, we will hold people to account, because we're like, I can't become a farmer anymore because now the seeds that can actually continue to live in this area, can grow in this area, are so expensive. I'm going to hold you accountable if you're going to commit to something, because you're doing that on my time, you're doing that on my life, you're doing that on my money. So we need accountability. Youth keep calling for accountability at COP, but those conversations are happening in passages and just outside. So we need the younger people to hold decision makers accountable to the commitments that they're making. And then the last point is scale. We keep talking about we need unique solutions for climate change because we've never faced it at this scale before, and we can keep talking about unique, and then someone comes with a unique idea and they say no, but it should be able to scale. Why? So we can fail at scale. What's going to work in Sudan won't necessarily work in Egypt, won't necessarily work in Botswana. So we need to, I think, as youth, as we are working on solutions for the communities we live in, on the other side, we need to get out of this idea of ideas have to scale. Scaling ideas sometimes just means we're failing at scale. And if someone is working to serve a community, at least that community is better off. And Sojoud will work on a solution that will make the youth and people of her country better, and Hanae over them. And yeah, a couple of points, but I'm going to end over here.
No, thank you so much. Okay, and there's a lot to follow up on, and everything that you said also with all three of you together.